Welcome to our final shiur for the season before summer recess. We are continuing with our studies of the very original thought of Rabbi Yonatan Eibeschutz, and I would like also to mention that tonight's shiur is dedicated to Nishmas Esther Bat Yitzchak Berker, that is Paul's grandmother, whose yahrzeit is tonight and tomorrow, the 14th of Av. So may the neshama have an aliyah, and thank you to Paul for sponsoring the shiur tonight. Sponsorship opportunities, by the way, are available in the future as well. So anyone who would like to follow Paul's fine example is certainly encouraged and lauded for doing so. Okay, let's begin at the beginning of Parashas Veschanan, which of course is the second parsha in the book of Dvarim. And as we know, the whole book of Dvarim, or much of the book of Dvarim, reviews or recapitulates events that were previously described earlier in the Torah, especially in Shmos, some of Bamidbar as well. And that is true for the beginning of our parsha right now also, where Moshe recalls how at that time I importuned God. So it's chapter 3, verse 23, which is the very beginning of our parsha. I importuned God. Rashi says, Ve'eschanan lashon chinun. It's an expression like we have the word tachanun. It means to plead. Ve'eschanan el Hashem. But Rashi explains that the word tachanun or chinunim here, without elaborating, but this is what Rashi is getting at, is related to the word chinam. Chinam means for free, not something which is earned or something which is deserved or something which a person pays for, but it's free. He's asking for a handout. Why does Moshe ask for a handout? Why doesn't Moshe say to Hashem, let me into the land of Israel because I've stood in my role in a dedicated, loyal manner for all of this time, and I've been your loyal servant. I've put up with the complaints and the difficulties of the Jewish people. Says Rashi, the way of the tzaddikim is that they don't fall back on their merit. Rashi says, Afal pi sheyesh lahem letzaddikim litlos b'maasem hatovim, even though the righteous can attribute, can sort of hang their hat when they have a request of God from their good deeds. Ein mevakshim meis hamakom ela matnas chinam. They don't ask from God anything other than a gift. And this is such an important principle, the idea that life itself is a gift, and that Moshe doesn't come to God and say, look, you owe me one. I've been through a lot with you, so now it's time for me to call in my chips. Moshe doesn't have that attitude. But there's something further which, and by the way, this principle I think is very important in life generally. It's a kind of repudiation of the idea of entitlement, the notion that is kimtamir, that, I've got it coming to me. But it's especially important in the realm of marriage. A person, a man, especially perhaps, who enters marriage with the expectation, maybe he's learned a bit of Talmud and he has some maybe naive ideas or self-serving ideas, and he imagines that a woman has many duties towards her husband. And, he may have also seen that his mother perhaps is very respectful of her husband, etc. And, that is fine. But he may have the wrong idea that it's coming to him. And this is what I like to call the Magia Li syndrome. I once heard from a very experienced madrich, someone who, thank you, Ruthie. Who teaches Chassanim, young men before their marriage, and he said to us that I always say to him, L'cha lo magia klum. You don't have any entitlement. You don't have any expectation. You don't have any claim for anything. If you have a Magia Li syndrome, which I call that by that term, then that is a formula for disappointment, even strife, and possibly worse in the context of a marriage. So this is just derech hagah, but really that's what Rashi is telling us here, that the tzaddikim, they don't appeal to God in terms of their merit, but rather only as a gift, as a to importune, to plead with Hashem. But Rabbi Eibeschutz says further, which I think is very astute. I always thought when I learned this Rashi that, and as I just sort of caricatured it now, just 2 minutes ago, that Moshe did not say to Hashem, look what I've done for you in the past, or look what I've done, how faithful I've been, or look how devoted I have been in the past. No, Rabbi Eibeschutz says that Moshe Rabbeinu could have said, I want to enter the land of Israel because I want to do the mitzvahs there. There are mitzvahs to Baritz. There's so many mitzvahs that can only be done in the land of Israel. And that's what the Gemara says, that Moshe wanted to enter the land, not because he wanted to eat of the wonderful produce of the land of Israel, but rather because he wanted to be able to fulfill the mitzvot of the land of Israel. So that's what Rabbi Yonatan says, that Moshe was saying to her, that Moshe did not say, if you let me in, I'm going to do so many great mitzvahs, I'm going to do so many ma'asim tovim, I'm going to do so many good deeds, I'm going to be of benefit to the Jewish people. Moshe doesn't even say that, because who knows what will be? Who knows what Moshe will be? Even someone with a track record like Moshe Rabbeinu at the age of 120, he doesn't say, look, I've been so devoted until now. If I get into the land of Israel, I can do more mitzvahs. I can be I can be of benefit to the generation. Moshe doesn't say that, because who knows what will be. And therefore, they don't say what I will do, or they don't say what I have done. Whether the tzaddikim just say, Hashem, let me in as a matnas chinam, as a gift. Veschanan. Fortunately for Moshe, it was not to be. We're going to soon possibly get a further insight as to why that might be. Then we have, just a few verses later, a very, you could say, surprising pasuk, which prima facie does not coincide with the way the Torah describes the important events. I'm looking at verse 26. Just turn a few psukim further. Pasuk Chaf Vav. Vayisaber Hashem bi lema'anchem. Moshe says that God was angry with me because of you. Lema'anchem. Lema'an means because of you. Velo shamai line. He did not hearken to me. Because Moshe is, again, relating. He said, I pleaded with God at that time. Let me into the land, etc. And God was angry with me because of you. And he said to me, Vayomer Elai Rav Lach, it's enough. Al tosef daber Elai od b'davar hazeh. Don't speak to me about this anymore. I'm not interested in hearing your pleading any longer. But the part which is, as I say, problematic is lema'anchem. Did Hashem get angry with Moshe because of the Jewish people? Not really. Hashem got angry with the Jewish people sometimes. Moshe got angry with the Jewish people sometimes. But Hashem's anger with Moshe was because of what Moshe did, which is logical, not because of what the Jewish people did. I say it's logical because ultimately a person is called to account for his behavior, not for someone else's. Now, the truth is that a leader is held accountable for the achievements or the failures of the generation. That's part of being a leader. You carry the can. So it wouldn't be completely irrational to say that Hashem was angry with Moshe because of what the Jewish people did. Hashem could say to Moshe, you let me down. You are not the leader that you could have been or should have been. Because the Jewish people sinned, and Moshe would, possibly be held accountable for that. But in the case of Moshe's fate, in which he was punished with the consequence of not entering the land of Israel, that wasn't because of what the people did. The people said, we want water. And Moshe was instructed to speak to the rock. Instead, he struck the rock. According to Rashi, we discussed in the past other possible explanations as to what the chait was. But whatever the chait was, it was Moshe's chait, not the people's chait. The pasuk says in Parashat Chukas, you did not believe in me, or you did not cause the Jewish people to believe in me. The Torah doesn't say that Hashem was angry with Moshe because of the failings of the Jewish people. And yet here it says, Hashem bi lema'anchem. So Yonatan says something which I have seen in other Mefarshim as well. I can't exactly remember at the moment where, but I'm quite sure other Mefarshim say the same idea, which is possibly, I would suggest, quite close to the pshat. even though it's not the simple understanding, but there may be something a little bit more subtle here. The word lema'anchem does not only mean because of you, because of something that you've done, it can also mean for your sake. Hashem be lema'anchem, for your sake. Hashem was angry with me. Hashem refused to let me into the land of Israel. Hashem refused to allow me to finish the task that I began 40 years earlier, taking you out of Mitzrayim. He declined to allow me to complete my mission of bringing you into the land of Israel. It was l'ma'anchem, it was for your sake. And you say, how so? How do the Jewish people benefit? The answer is that Moshe is associated with the sphere of Netzach. Netzach means a few things. It means victory, but Netzach also means eternity, something which lasts forever, does not falter, does not fizzle out. La Netzach, like we say, Ula Netzach Nitzachim, forever and ever. That's how it's normally translated. What Moshe does is permanent. Moshe took us out of Egypt. We never again were enslaved in Egypt. You can go back for a visit. Jewish people even went to settle there until around 1948. There was a substantial Jewish community in Egypt, but the Jewish people were never again enslaved in Egypt. More fundamentally, Hashem gave us the Torah, and the Torah is eternal. The Torah has not been superseded, has not been forgotten, has not been rendered obsolete. The Torah endures. If Moshe had brought them into the land of Israel and he had built the Beis HaMikdash would never have been destroyed. So you say, well, that's fantastic. We just finished Tisha B'Av 3 days ago when we suffered yet again, year by year because of the recollection of it. Would it be fantastic if it wasn't destroyed? We are mourning the destruction. But as the Gemara famously says, Kila chamasu al eitzim va'avanim, that Hashem expended his anger on the wood and on the stones. The Beis HaMikdash as a structure was burned, and it was razed to the ground, and it was trashed, and it was a heap of rubble until it was rebuilt, and then it was destroyed again, as we very well know. The archaeologists are still excavating it now, all these years later. So you say, yeah, but that's tragic. Well, it is tragic that the temple was destroyed, but within the tragedy is, I don't want to say a silver lining, because that would not be quite the way to describe it. Within the tragedy, there is a ray of hope, and the ray of hope is the survival of the Jewish people. How many people, how many tribes or nations in antiquity have passed permanently from the scene of history? Probably hundreds, many of whose names are not well known, or possibly not even, perhaps they've been forgotten entirely. But there's so many of them. I mean, all of the biblical nations, the Philistines, the Moabites, the Ammonites, how many more? The Carthaginians, Etruscans. There are lots and lots of them. Their history, their ancient history, the Jewish people have endured. Why? Because when Hashem was angry with the Jewish people, Hashem destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, or allowed the Babylonians or the Romans to destroy it, exiled the Jewish people amid much suffering, but the Jewish people survived. If Moshe had led them into the land of Israel, and the Jewish people had demonstrated once again their backsliding or their cantankerous manner, and they had succumbed, as perhaps it was inevitable that they would, to idolatry, and Hashem was angry with the Jewish people, the option of destroying the Beis HaMikdash and preserving the nation would not exist if Moshe had led them. And therefore it was binary choice, all or nothing. Because Moshe did not lead them in, because Yoshua led them in at a much lower level, the Jewish people ultimately survived because they are the people of God. The temple was destroyed. But if Moshe Rabbeinu had built the Beis HaMikdash, then that option would not have been available, so to speak. This is what Rabbi Eibeschutz says, and as I said, other Mefarshim suggest that as well. According to that, it fits in very well. Hashem was angry with me, but actually it was for your sake. It was for your sake. I want to now share with you a very, I think, quite novel explanation on this same pasuk. Hashem said to me, Rav lach al tosef daber elai ol b'davar hazeh. It's enough. Rav lach, you've got a lot. You have enough. You have plenty. Don't speak to me about this any longer. Now, Moshe's plea was, let me into the land of Israel. Now, Hashem had already told him previously that you're not going to go into the land. We just talked about it right now. I mean, that's the pasuk alludes to that because of Mei Mariva, the Chet Mei Mariva, of the waters of striving. Moreover, Hashem already told Moshe in Parshas Pinchas a few weeks ago, we read it, that your time has come. And he said something similar to what we have right here, because this is a recapitulation of those events. Go up to the mountain, gaze at the land of Israel. See it from afar. You're not going to enter there. Moshe immediately said, who's my successor? That I can't abandon, don't allow the Jewish people to be like a flock without a shepherd. Hashem says, I've got the guy for you, Yehoshua. And the Torah describes how Moshe ordained Yehoshua. He gave smicha to Yehoshua. So you can wonder, what's the point of Moshe still like banging on to Hashem, let me in, let me in. Hashem already told him no. Moshe himself had said, choose a successor. Hashem told him, Yehoshua, it's in Parashas Pinchas, Yehoshua is your successor. He already ordained him. So Moshe's time has come. Yehoshua's sun is now rising, and it's time for Moshe's sun to set. What was, as we say in the Talmudic terminology, what was Moshe's Hava Amina? What was he trying to get at? He can't turn back the clock. Yehoshua has already been ordained. The answer is that Moshe was saying to Hashem, you know what? I just want to go into the land. I just want to have a chance to fulfill the mitzvahs of the land of Israel. I want to be part of Jewish destiny. I'll just be a foot soldier. Yehoshua is going to be the leader. Let him be the leader. I'll go into retirement. I'll just be a private citizen, and I'll go into the land like a foot soldier. I don't know whether they need soldiers at Moshe's age, but I'll just be one of the guys. That was his suggestion. Says Rabbi Yonatan Eibeschutz, Hashem told Moshe that is not a good idea, because the Medrash says, Meya misos velo kina achas. Better to die 100 deaths than to be jealous of someone. To live with jealousy is destructive to the one who is the object of the jealousy, but it's even more destructive to the person who is jealous. Hashem says to Moshe, your idea of going into the land of Israel, just as one of the hoi polloi, just as one of the proletariats, and Yehoshua will be the leader, you won't be able to cope with that. You won't be able to survive the experience of being demoted and watching someone who is not nearly as exalted as you. Remember what the Medrash says, that Moshe's face was radiant like the sun, and Yehoshua was radiant like the moon that reflects the light of the sun. So Hashem says to Moshe, that's not going to work. You'll never be able to endure not so much the humiliation, but you won't be able to endure the inevitable sense of jealousy. That's what Chazal say. So Rabbi Yonatan Eibeschutz says that now, this is how he fits into the words. Take a look again at this pasuk Chavav. He says, Rav lach, now you are the Rav. You're at the top of the pyramid. Al tosef daber alai, but if you demote yourself, or if I allow you to be demoted, so presently the voice of the Shekhinah speaks through your throat. When you speak, you are like a mouthpiece for the Shekhinah. The whole Torah, Zos HaTorah Shesam Moshe Lifnei Bnei Israel. The words of Moshe are the words of Torah, the words of God, the words of the prophetic, not just inspiration, but the words of Hashem emanating from the larynx of Moshe. That's Al Tosef Daber Elai Od B'Davar Hazeh. If I demote you, you won't be able to speak any longer with prophecy. You will lose the gift of prophecy. The well springs of wisdom will be closed off for you. The suffering, the agony of that experience, and then watching someone who is your junior, your apprentice, your disciple, who's not nearly your equal, to see him as the leader, you won't be able to survive. You won't be able to cope. And therefore, according to Rabbi Eibeschutz, and I said it is a novel idea. It's almost bold. Hashem says to Moshe, I know better than you. Better to go out on a high, better, I can't remember what I called this year anymore. Yeah, better up and out than down and out. You're going to, you're going to die anyway, but eventually everyone does, including Moshe Rabbeinu. He's flesh and blood. But this way, at least you'll go out on a high. You're up and out. The other way, down and out, you'll be down and out because you'll be so I don't want to say depressed, but it will be so distressing for you. You're better off without it. And he says, I can't read it that well. I'm sorry because of my ophthalmology experience. But as he says, you'll go mala, you'll ascend until you're a malach, until your last breath, you'll be on this exalted level. The alternative of being on a lower level and you have no more gift of prophecy, you can no longer speak with a gift of prophecy. He says, Rablach, and right now you're Rav, you're great. Al Tosef Daber Elai Od Badarazeh, but you won't be able to speak this way anymore. You won't be able to speak to Hashem anymore. You'll just be one of the guys, and you'll never cope with that. I said on Tisha B'Av morning, a few of the participants in this year were there. A story about Rav Shalom Shvadron. When I learned this passage in Rabbi Eibeschutz, the story occurred to me, and I just would like to repeat it. Rabbi Shalom Shvadron was the Magid of Yerushalayim, one of the great raconteurs and Talmidei Chachamim of the generation, and he was gifted, captivating, entertaining, and an emotional speaker. I heard him speak once in person, and he's outstanding. Pesach Krohn, who writes the Magid books, was very close with Rabbi Shalom Shvadron, and he, in a way, is his kind of disciple, I think we could say. Also very, very talented, of course. Rabbi Shalom Shvadron used to give a shiur. He would speak many times on many occasions all over the world, but there was one particular shiur that he gave every week, and that was in the waning minutes of Shabbos. In a certain shul in Shari Chesed, he had maybe hundreds probably of people who would come from all over to hear him because he was so inspiring and so compelling and so brilliant, also sometimes humorous and sometimes emotive. Motzai Shabbos Parshas Bereshis, he got up to speak. He was already 85 years old, and he started and he stopped. He couldn't carry on. He started again and he lost his train of thought. People were shifting uncomfortably, awkwardly in their seat. Rav Shalom Shvadron beckoned to his son to come over and to remind him what he was going to say. Possibly the son had heard the stories before, or the Torah before. His son reminded him, and he started again, and he faltered after a sentence or two. He couldn't carry on. His mind, unfortunately, was failing, and with tears in his eyes, he cried and he said, you see what happens to an Eltre Yid, an old man. He said, you see what happens? I can't even open my mouth. I can't even speak. And for someone for whom his Koach HaDibur was his highest glory, who was renowned around the city and around the world for his gift of speech, etc., to not be able to weave together two sentences, the humiliation and the desperation was overwhelming. He died about 2 months later, in 1997, I think. Rabbi Yonatan says something a little bit similar with Moshe Rabbeinu, that the gift of prophecy will be taken from you. Better that you should go out on a high, better up and out than down and out. We've got a few minutes left, and I want to conclude with a very important principle. It is true in psychology. Many years ago, I studied cognitive psychology in university, and one of the things we looked at is memory. How can one enhance memory? I don't mean through memory like exercises or devices, but what causes a person to remember something better than another person or the same person under different circumstances, the same material. So a lot of psychological research is invested in that particular subject. Rabbi Yonatan Eibeschutz has a suggestion here of, based on the Torah itself, how to enhance your memory. But it's not just as a memory aid, but it's to fulfill a very important mitzvah in the Torah. You'll find it in chapter 4, verse 9. Rak hishamer lecha. The Torah here is describing the experience of Matan Torah, which later on in the Parasha we have the whole more elaborate account, including the 10 Commandments as well. But here the Torah says in Pasuk Tes, Raki shamer lecha ushmor nafshecha ma'od. Be very careful and guard your soul greatly, lest you forget the things that your eyes beheld. And it goes on in that vein. So Rabbi Yonatan Eibeschutz says, actually, no, I need to read the rest of it as well. And lest all of the days of your life, that which you experience at Matan Torah departs from your heart. You shall teach them to your children and to your grandchildren. The Torah here emphasizes the importance of remembering Matan Torah, not forgetting Matan Torah, but by extension, the Torah here is talking about remembering the Torah itself, remembering your Torah learning. Rabbi Yonatan Eibeschutz says here a very beautiful idea. He says, Pen tishkach v'hoda'atam. So the simple understanding is don't forget, so that you are able to convey it to your children and to your grandchildren. I heard a series of shiurim based just on this pasuk from Moshe Shapiro Zechron Levracha many years ago. We had a private chabura at one time, an elaboration of this pasuk based on Ramban at a much deeper level. Vodatam levanecha, transmit it to your children, not only the content of the Torah, but the experience of Matan Torah. Says Rabbi Yonatan Eibeschutz, there's another interpretation here altogether. When it says Vodatam levanecha, you shall teach your children and your talmidim, your disciples, or I would say whoever is listening, this is the way to achieve not forgetting. Pen tishkachas advarim, lest you forget. The way to avoid forgetting is to teach others. Because if you receive the Torah, then it's just a matana, something that you've received. He quotes the pasuk in the very beginning, by which, and I mean the very, very beginning of Tehillim, the first verse in Tehillim, Ashrei Ha'ish, the first verse in the book of Psalms, Ashrei sheshelo halach b'atzas v'shayim v'derech chataim lo aman, happy is the one who did not walk in the way of the scoffers, etc. The next pasuk. But his desire is in the teaching of God. And in his Torah, he will contemplate day and night. So, Rabbi Yonatan Eibeschutz says one can juxtapose these two statements and wonder, is there a contradiction? First it says, Torah Hashem Cheftso, the Torah of God is his desire. And then it says, in his own Torah. The implication is the man's own Torah. A man will desire the Torah of God, and in his Torah, that is to say, his own Torah, he will contemplate. So the Gemara says, is this a contradiction? Well, obviously, it's not really a contradiction, but the Gemara is trying to tease out something, and that is that initially, a person, when he receives the Torah, it's the Torah of God. It's a gift. When you teach Torah, then it becomes yours. When you teach Torah, then it becomes yours. You're not just a receiver of Torah, you're a transmitter of Torah. Then it's a V'sarasoyeheget. Then it becomes the person's own Torah. The way to acquire Torah is to teach it. And when you teach it, you remember it better. And then you don't forget it, but not just that you remember it better, but you're not just someone who has received Torah, but rather you are someone who has acquired it and transmitted it, and then it becomes yours because you've left your mark on that Torah, hopefully in a positive way. We don't want to transmit the Torah in its limited form. We want to explore it and polish it and expose the different facets of the Torah, hopefully in a way which is in keeping with the principles of Torah elucidation. And therefore it says in the next passage, the leaves will never wither. It's a way of saying that the Torah will be preserved. You won't forget the Torah because you've received the Torah and you have transmitted the Torah. That's why it says, don't forget what you've seen and what you've experienced. The way to do that is to transmit the Torah, to teach the Torah. I would like to challenge all of our listeners tonight. Think of something that you can share, whether at the Shabbos table, with a friend, with a spouse, something that you can share, even from tonight's shiur. Maybe you've learned something that I hope you have, something that you can say over. When you say it over, when you repeat it, maybe you'll improve it, maybe you'll enhance it, maybe you'll expose another aspect of it, maybe you'll refute it even, but it will be yours. And when you transmit it, you are participating in the transmission of Torah from generation to generation, fulfilling this pasuk in a very beautiful way, in a very relevant way. And I wish everyone a wonderful evening and a good Shabbos. And I apologize again, I've got to go to Mincha. But again, Shemi Uli Neshama for Esther Bas Yitzchak. Thank you again to Paul for sponsoring the shiur tonight and hosting the shiur tonight.
Thank you.
Time as well. So
when do we continue? When do we start up again?
Yeah, we continue on the first Thursday in September. So we're